That that is genuinely wild. There's a couple things here. We need to, like, just hit pause and just think about this. We were totally freaked out going into the year. I certainly wasn't sitting around being like, "All these great things are gonna play out, and there's so much hope, and what could possibly be achieved."
But like one thing that we should take away from 25 is that solar punk is a thing, right? Like we are now seeing countries fully switch from fossil fuel economy to solar-based economy, and that is mostly happening in the global south. Yeah, I mean, like AI is the big thing. Like it's the big wave, right? It's the big framework shift. It is the big wave that's currently rising all boats, right? But it might also crush all of them, right?
Welcome to Off the Record, the Climate Tech Edition. This is the podcast all about what's hot in climate tech and everything playing out behind the scenes. Today's episode is all about the big developments that played out in climate tech in 2025, including one huge surprise we totally did not see coming. Now, if you think back to 2025, what stands out to you? Let me guess. Maybe AI? Yep, AI, data centers, power production, they were all huge during that year, and they deserve a lot of attention. But there was so much more that happened than just AI. Think back to January 2025. Everything in climate and climate tech was looking pretty bleak, kind of like a car wreck playing out in slow motion. We had huge new policy changes coming down the pipe from the US, and there were some really nasty global economic conditions starting to come together as well. And yet, somehow, we ended off the year in a totally different, totally unexpected place that we weren't planning on. Now, if you want to remember all the major twists and turns, both for the better and for the worse, and get a sense of maybe where things might go next in 2026, you're going to want to check out this episode. Now, today we're going to talk about 5 different topics. Topic number 1, despite all the turbulence, are we already winning in climate tech? Topic number 2, everything during 2025 kind of felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Topic number 3, we can't really talk about the year without getting into AI, power production, data centers. Topic number 4, the clean energy generation boost. And finally, topic number 5, we're going to get into some initial predictions around what might play out in the space in 2026. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Hi, I'm Jordy Gold.
And I'm gonna go.
Welcome to Off the Record, the Climate Tech Edition. Scanner, I cannot believe the 2025 has already come and gone. It just absolutely blew by. So much happened, both good and bad, on the climate tech front. And a lot of it wasn't really expected.
Yeah, crazy year. Year of extremes. I think like the whole general 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step to the side, is just very true. We had like in good news, we had some true leaps, but in bad news, we also had some true leaps backwards.
Yep, totally. There really were things that moved in that direction. So today, we want to talk about the 4 big stories that we saw coming out of 2025. And I should probably also mention that we're actually going to be working on a whole different episode after this one on predictions for what might happen in 2026. So we're working on this one now. We're going to work on that one next. So to get things started, if we think back, beginning of 2025, there were a lot of concerns in the climate tech world. What was going to happen to climate tech? What was going to happen on the policy front? A lot of bad things seemed like they could come in that direction, and it was not very encouraging. Now, this is the funny thing. By the end of the year, some of the concerns were very real and there were some real problems. And yet we seemed to finish off the year in a much different place than I think that we actually expected. Could you sort of rewind things a little bit, go back to January 2025? Can you talk us through sort of what we thought was going to happen that year or where it seemed to be going and then what actually generally played out?
Yeah, I mean, like we went into the year 25 very similar to what we're going into 26, but with I think even more question marks, right? So if you're listening to this at the beginning of 26, you know the general feeling of okay, like a lot of things happen in 25. A lot of bad things, obviously, a lot of good things. Just a lot of signal and so much more noise, right? And like that was the vibe that we went into 25, right? Like we had just a new US administration that came in. that freaked people out for sure. There was a lot of waiting, a lot of, okay, like how will the dice fall? That was like the biggest question mark, right? Like, unfortunately, it wasn't like a big reveal that happened at the beginning of the year, and then we got clarity for the rest of the year. And this is why I, like, refer to like our feeling going into 26. It still felt very chaotic, right? Like throughout the year. But we got like some cards were put on a table, and it became clear very, very slowly that in some fields that we are actually winning, right? So like, clean energy, solar, wind, batteries has been winning all year long, no matter what the headwinds were, no matter how badly the policy played against it. So, like, just to throw some numbers out, as a bundle, clean energy grew 3% faster per year than the overall energy demand. And that means we got like the steady compounding. Like, if the trend line continues, at least for like the clean energy part, we will have a very clear fossil fuel peak around 35. We might have a clear decline by 45, and that would mean you would also have an elimination of fossil fuels by 65. And that is despite the panic, despite the uncertainty, despite the continuing chaos.
That that is genuinely wild. There's a couple things here. We need to like just hit pause and just think about this. We were totally freaked out going into the year. I certainly wasn't sitting around being like, all these great things are going to play out and there's so much hope and what could possibly be achieved. And here we are, you're throwing out these kind of numbers. If things had gone as badly as we thought they could go at the beginning of 2025, I can't even imagine what this conversation would look like right now. I'm not even sure we'd have this conversation right now. I'm not sure there'd be a point. I don't think people expected to see this kind of progress. Just things like getting specific dates, real dates, certainly likely in our lifetimes, in the relatively near future, when we could see fossil fuel use drop dramatically, peak and drop. That's a big deal. So beyond that, what else did we see?
Alrighty, we're always very, very focused on, whatever's going on in the West and like the big storylines and Trump and, our European elections. But like one thing that we should take away from 25 is that solar punk is a thing, right? Like, we are now seeing countries fully switch from fossil fuel economy to an electricity stack, solar-based economy, and that is mostly happening in the global south, right? Like, we saw, very, very good progress with companies and imports and manufacturing of solar batteries and like all the use cases that are connecting to it.
Yeah, so we should let people know. So you wrote a story on the whole solar punk thing, on solar in Africa going wild. The story totally went viral. We've actually recorded a whole episode talking about that story, so people can look forward to seeing that episode later on. We'll be releasing that in the future, hopefully not too long from now. Now, given that we started the year thinking that we'd be losing by the end of the year, and given that things turned out in a very different way than we expected going into 2025, how does this set things up for 2026 and kind of where do we go next?
I think the successes from 25, or like the mechanisms behind the successes in 25, will be the mechanisms behind the successes in 26. And I think there's like two major ones. One is existing flywheels that keep turning, and climate companies using Trojan horses like AI and defense and making progress on the big waves that are currently happening. And unfortunately, big wave is not climate per se, but AI globally and defense and manufacturing in larger parts of the world. Perhaps like an explainer of flywheels first, and then we can go to the Trojan horse thing next. Flywheels are essentially loops where each win make the next win easier, right? So it's a business term, but it applies to product, it applies to manufacturing, it applies to, making things happen in the real world. A good like typical business example is like, you have a better product brings happier users tell other people, this is word of mouth, this brings more users bring more revenue and more product feedback, and that brings a better product, and this is a circle because we started out a better product and now we have happy users, right? Like, so, and then it continues. And we have seen this, in everything from solar to batteries and like EVs and all the big like climate successes, where cheaper solar panels means more solar is being sold and more use cases are unlocked, and that means more solar is getting built, and that means more factories are producing solar. They scale up, they produce more. The more they produce, the more they learn, the costs drop again, and then even more solar gets built, and the flywheel turns, right? Leading to just literally more deployment of the nice climate solutions we want to see.
That's amazing. And you mentioned Trojan horses and with AI and with defense as well. I happy for you to comment on that one thing just to throw out. I don't think a lot of people just observing from around the world, watching how things are playing out, are thinking, oh yeah, the big AI build out or the big push in the defense sector is going to really help climate tech very much, but that would be wonderful.
Um, it is happening. It is helping specific parts in the climate solution world. We will talk about this, I think, in a 26 episode. So let
Yeah.
me make my point relatively short. AI needs data centers. Data centers need a lot of energy. Energy that is currently cheap comes from clean sources, and that's the summary essentially.
Which is amazing. There'll be more to say on that one, but yeah, it's pretty self-evident how that could turn into a really good thing. So at the top of the episode, you mentioned how it sort of felt a little bit like two steps forward, one step back throughout the year. What are some examples you could point to for where we sort of felt like that's how things were moving?
I mean, like, very obviously, everything around politics and subsidies and regulatory guardrails that we have in place, right? We were all like very much looking forward to what the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the subsidies connected to it would enable in the US. Same with a lot of the loans that the Department of Energy was giving out, and then we had a regime change, right? And we had a new bill, the one big beautiful bill that is now dismantling everything. Everything else kind of like seems in stasis and frozen. We don't know how that will turn out, right?
Yeah.
And then we had this whole like trade tariff issue, right? Because not only our like economy is globalized, but like obviously all of our supply chains and all of our climate supply chains are also very interconnected, right? So far, I think like two steps forward, one step back also means that we might have made like some little progress there, and we saw a lot of regional uptick, right? Like federal level was complicated, but then if you like really zoomed in specific jurisdictions, you had a very decent amount of progress.
Okay, well, I guess it's at least something we saw some regional progress. That's a good thing. Now, given all these challenges, which it seems like these kinds of challenges are going to continue, it doesn't feel like that's going to end anytime soon. How do you think these trends are going to carry through into 2026?
I think it's will continue to be a year of extremes, right? And it will be two steps forward, one step back, one step to the side, and like one step we're not sure in which like dimensional direction it's going. And that like that uncertainty is something that we need to live by. One thing is clear: we're moving away from a world where promises were kept and we had like some kind of like clear guardrails on things, to everything might change in the next tweet, everything might change in the next week, and a lot of moving parts, right? Like so this is why it will be a very strongly year of extremes, because we will see some things will work out and some things will be side railed by things we will probably not know yet.
It's not exactly entirely encouraging, but not totally surprising either. Kind of makes sense. Looking at 2025, topic number three. We can't really talk about the year without talking about this one big thing: AI, power production, and data centers. It's pretty important how things developed. Can you break this down for us, how things went in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, like AI is the big thing. Like, it's the big wave, right? It's the big framework shift. It is, well, essentially the big wave that's currently rising all boats, right? But it might also crush all of them, right? Like, if we would have 3 days and unlimited data points, we could like now make camps for it's a bubble, it's not, it will burst, it will not. We will talk a little bit in the 26th episode on that. But that was also like, again, the vibe of 25, right? Like, AI was clearly the thing that we saw tremendous amount of investment in. We saw a tremendous build out in a general like data center ecosystem and AI ecosystem, especially around the power bottleneck question, which is a bottleneck right now, but will be a huge bottleneck in 26. And then it will just like, given that all investments that were announced will hold up, will continue, right? So everybody's doing data centers now, right? Like that's the like the long story short. As long as we take a huge bet on AI in our like overall economy, everybody is living in this like ecosystem data logic. I actually just came back from a meeting with a founder of a circularity company that is in Europe and in the US. 60% of the conversation was around compute, their partnership with NVIDIA, and going back to everything. Every conversation becomes has at least AI tangents and or fully becomes an AI conversation. In 25, we saw a lot of those narratives already, right? Like we saw efficiency gains that got canceled out by Javan's paradox. Stuff like this will happen all the time, where we have like one big news followed by another big news followed by people making up their mind and then changing their mind, and trajectories being changed every shorter and shorter time frame, weeks basis, days basis, hours.
Yeah, entirely. For people who don't know Jevons paradox, I know it, but could you do a quick definition?
Okay, so the story in 25 was everybody was keeping an eye on like how models were developing. AI models were getting better and better all the time, and then the question is like, okay, like an AI model is only as good as the data it uses to train, and in the end also how efficient it becomes, right? And we had this like step change function where we had Chinese models coming out that were so much more efficient than the models that they were based on, it turned out, in the US. And also like GPUs and data centers also just became more and more efficient because the more money we throw at a problem, the better we get at it. And the question with like efficiency is, okay, like if we're getting so efficient, are we using more resources, or are we using less resources? And Jevons paradox in the end says, if something gets more efficient, it gets cheaper to use, so people use way more of it, and then the general consumption goes up, not down, how you would expect it to be. So the AI example here is we throw so much money at AI that everything in AI gets cheaper, especially the relevant compute per task. So the cheaper AI gets, the more we use it for more things. So the more things AI can do, the more we use it, and then the bigger it gets on a bigger scale, the more energy we use it, and the whole, again, it's a flywheel, the flywheel spins.
Gotcha. Exactly. Looking at AI, power generation, data centers, what's going to happen in 2026? I know we're going to talk more about this in the next episode. I think people are going to hear that, but care to make any general predictions?
Again, we will spend more time on this. Please check out the next episode. So every flywheel will continue spinning, except the flywheels that are supported by subsidies or were supported by subsidies so far, and the subsidies are falling away. And then we will see if the flywheels can stand by themselves, if something else can make the flywheels turn. The flywheel that will keep spinning for sure, unless the bubble bursts, but for so far we don't see it, is the data center ecosystem. And as long as the data center ecosystem flywheel is spinning, we will see some really large bets in all kinds of bottlenecks, especially around energy generation and transmission and the grid.
Cool. I think it's a good start for the conversation, so we can dive into it more later on. Now, let's move on to our final story number 4. During the year, we spent a bunch of time focused on what you called the climate tech funding ice age, where basically there's just a lack of money, a lot of pain, a lot of difficulties as a result of that. And the thing that I guess probably we didn't really see coming, or we weren't talking about at the beginning of 2025, was that if there was going to be this big ice age and difficulty in getting funding, we wound up seeing energy creation take off on many, many different fronts in the year. So could you maybe share a little bit what we saw happen?
Okay, so obviously AI or AI generated companies were like AI supported companies weren't the only ones who got funding, but also everything that would create cheap-ish or had the chance of creating cheap-ish stable power, right? And the two big narratives here were like nuclear renaissance and everything that was happening around that. Right? So we had for the first time ever a huge amount of offtake. Right? So companies purchasing future energy created by nuclear small modular reactors and fusion itself already, right? And that also led to like large funding rounds. I mean, like we had the largest IPO in climate history ever because Trump Media merged with the largest fusion company in the US, right? Like so a lot of like extremes and absurdities already in 25.
Yeah. So any thoughts where this might go next?
Well, the main thing is that these things are bets, and that we will find out if these bets work or not. And if they work out, we will see like some version of a Cambrian explosion, and perhaps like already the idea of what happens if we have energy abundance, if energy becomes actually too cheap to matter. And if it doesn't, we will see some kind of bust, and that means consolidation. That means we are in the 2 steps back, 1 step forward type logic.
Gotcha. Back to 2025. What about geothermal? I take it that it had quite a year.
Yeah, it was 100% geothermal's year in the spotlight so far, and might be even like geothermal's through year being 26. Let's see, but like so far geothermal as a power source was geographically very limited, and thanks to mostly fracking, to be fair, but a lot of like technological improvements that we could borrow from oil and gas. To be fair, we are now entering a world where new generations of geothermal technologies can actually be tested out. And like we saw a lot of investment in this in 25. We saw the first, let's say early numbers in test fields of if this new technology is actually going to work out. And if 26 will be the year that we hope it to be, we will see very good numbers from more and more field tests, and then we might even see IPOs of geothermal companies. And then the market will come and judge if everything works out. But like there's the big hope of, okay, like we might actually see a lot of investment flooding the space and a lot of energy coming out of this.
I'll be very curious to see how the tech keeps on developing and how that market responds. I think there's a lot of hope and interest. I really do hope that things come through, but we will certainly see. So stepping back for just a minute, I clearly remember doing calls with you when we were wrapping up 2024, December 2024. You were getting a whole bunch of predictions from super interesting, super connected folks who were suggesting what they thought might happen in 2025. I don't think any of them quite guessed or could have guessed how things would actually turn out. So now that we're looking into this new year that we've just started, given that no one really seemed to know exactly where everything was going in 2025, any overall thoughts on what happens with climate tech in 2026?
Some technologies who are starting to see the first traction will gain a lot of traction, and that will be, if we talk again at the end of 26, or like at the beginning of 27, this will be our like positive case studies. Unfortunately, we will see some of those flywheels freeze, or be stop and go, and that will be the technologies where we will say, okay, let's see and wait how it will work out.
Gotcha. So you've started making a couple interesting predictions for 2026. You have a lot more to share. We're going to do this whole other episode on it. Now, I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. Could you maybe give people just a taste of the kinds of things we're going to talk about in the next episode?
Yep, 100%. We're going to talk about the center of our AI universe right now, data centers. We talked about this like pure demand logic of like energy demand and grid demand a little bit, but we need to talk about resilience. We need to talk about interconnection. We need to talk about speed. And we need to talk about like bring your own power and everything that's connected to it. Because like if 25 was the year where we saw the first like true investments, 26 will be the year where we actually see some pathways emergent. a lot will be continue this like firm power discussion that we just had, geothermal and nuclear, but also everything that's being enabled through solar plus batteries, right? And that is all like being happening in the data center boom. We had whole companies that were coming out in 25 from C to Series A, like scaling up insanely in 1 year on the back of being able to sell to data centers, right? And we had technologies like concentrated solar coming up again, heat storage, all of that. And so the questions we will kind of be like, what is the next PV solar gonna be?
Gotcha.
We didn't talk yet about like grid bottlenecks, but grid bottlenecks are becoming like an obvious like real market, because we have real purchasing power behind it now. So we need to talk permitting, we need to talk interconnection queues, we need to talk capacity across the system, and then like in general, like how can we improve the grid? And then storage is something that we mention from time to time because it's the necessary thing for solar and intermittent energy sources, right? We saw in 25 grid scale batteries positively exploding, scaling up, but we are now seeing also new batteries, sodium ion as a very talked about thing in 25, but where we see actually like proof points in 26. And we see a lot of like business models that should help us, produce more batteries. So that's important. And then, in the wider tech world, wider investment world, we see this whole like trend towards reindustrialization, right? So we need to onshore and produce more of wherever we are. So how do we do that? And then that ends up in the conversation around physical AI, right? So if we onshore all of our supply chains, bring battery manufacturing and power electronics and robotics and everything over to the West, and at the same time apply AI to our physical systems and everything across the electric stack that got cheaper, grid, factories, materials, whatever we want to have, even humanoid robots. Where will we end up? This will make like 26 very, very interesting because we will take a lot of bets across the whole field, and like hopefully a lot of cards will be reshuffled.
That's a lot of good stuff that we got to cover. I'm genuinely interested in all of it. I have to say, the few side conversations we've had so far, I know you've been chatting with some folks. I think people will be very curious to hear what you're hearing about physical AI and robotics, given some of the both doubts and hope and hype and all these things going on in that space. I think it'll be a really fun conversation to have. So yeah, I really want to know what's coming up in that new year.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm looking forward. I will be a lot of fun discussions because it will be a crazy and hopefully fun and not frustrating 26.
I hope, I hope, I hope. Hopefully, it's just 2 steps forward and no steps back. Probably too much to hope for, but, would be nice. Well, keep your eyes open. That episode on 2026 will be coming out shortly. As always, if you liked what you heard, please do share this with your friends. Sign up for the Climate Drift newsletter. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the show, comment on the show. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to hear about. And we will be back with another episode soon. Thanks so much.
Like and subscribe.
See you, man.